In the corridors of ancient Persia, where shadows of power stretched long across the palace walls, a young woman named Esther stepped into a story far greater than herself. Her presence was quiet, almost hidden, yet within her lay a courage that history itself could not ignore. What was it about this unlikely heroine that would one day shift the destiny of nations? This is not the soft tale, often whispered to children. It is a drama of secrets, midnight decisions, and the fragile breath between life and death. Esther's faith was not passive. It was defiance wrapped in humility, a silent fire that burned even when the threat of extinction loomed. Her rise is not only shocking, it is proof that heaven often hides its fiercest warriors in the most unexpected places. If you believe hidden heroes are still rising in our world, type 777 inches, the comments, as your sacred marker of faith. Let it be more than numbers. It is your agreement with destiny. And to each of you who have supported through your likes, shares, subscriptions, and especially through super thanks, your presence is deeply valued. You are part of this unfolding story. Stay with me, because the next turn in Esther's journey will not only surprise you, it will awaken something inside you. Her hidden faith is about to be revealed, and its power may just mirror your own calling. The untold story of Esther's faith, a hidden hero, rises in Scripture. In the sprawling expanse of the ancient Persian Empire, King Xerxes reigned with unmatched authority from his resplendent palace in Susa, a city that shimmered like a jewel in the heart of his kingdom, known far and wide for his immense power and opulent wealth. Xerxes' name echoed through the lands as both a ruler and a symbol of grandeur. His courts overflowed with treasures of gold, jewels that captured the sunlight in fiery bursts, and garments woven with threads finer than silk, each piece a testament to the majesty he commanded. In a sudden yet deliberate display of this unrivaled glory, Xerxes decreed a magnificent banquet, one that would not merely feed the senses, but impress upon all who attended the absolute power and influence of Persia. The preparations were meticulous. The finest animals were brought from distant lands. The most exotic spices and wines filled the palace halls, and entertainers, musicians, dancers, and performers from across the empire were summoned to dazzle the audience with feats that seemed almost otherworldly. For days, the palace echoed with music and laughter, the air thick with the rich aromas of roasted meats, honeyed fruits, and spiced delicacies, while goblets overflowed with the richest wines, as if the very rivers of the empire had been poured into the grand hall. Yet, amidst this splendor, beneath the glittering surface of gold and feasts, there lingered the unseen tension of a kingdom ruled by both fear and admiration. Every guest, from the highest noble to the lowest attendant, sensed the invisible weight of the king's authority, a reminder that within these walls, the line between celebration and judgment was as thin as the finest Persian silk. This banquet was more than a feast. It was a stage on which the grandeur of Persia would be displayed, a spectacle that would be remembered for generations, setting the scene for stories of courage, destiny, and hidden heroes waiting quietly in the shadow of such immense power. On the final day of the opulent banquet, as the golden sun dipped low over the walls of Susa, King Xerxes, in a display of both authority and vanity, commanded his queen, Vashti, to appear before the assembled lords and nobles, adorned in her royal crown. so that all might witness her renowned beauty. The halls, still echoing with the laughter, music, and clinking of goblets from the days-long festivities, fell into a tense silence as the summons was delivered. Yet, Queen Vashti, steadfast and resolute, refused to obey the king's command. Her defiance was not mere pride, it was a declaration of dignity in the face of humiliation. A quiet yet unyielding strength that shook the very foundations of Xerxes' expectations. The king's anger erupted like a storm, fierce and unrelenting, sweeping through the palace with an intensity that silenced even the bravest courtiers. The advisors, sensing the danger in the king's wrath, yet cautious of their own fates, gathered to counsel him. They spoke of laws, of precedent, of the necessity of maintaining authority and order. Their words, heavy with the weight of tradition, guided Xerxes toward a decision that would ripple across the entire empire. Queen Vashti would be banished from the palace, her name erased from the halls of power, and a search would commence for a new queen to embody the splendor and obedience expected of Persia's royal consort. A royal decree was swiftly issued, carried on the wings of swift messengers to every province, all city, and village across the vast empire. Young women, chosen for their beauty, virtue, and grace, were invited to come to Susa, each hopeful of a destiny that might place her upon the throne beside the mighty Xerxes. The palace, once filled with the echoes of a single queen's presence, now buzzed with whispers of possibility, ambition, and intrigue. In this sudden vacuum of power and the uncertainty that followed, the stage was quietly set for a hidden hero to rise, one whose courage and faith would alter the course of history from within the very heart of the Persian kingdom. Among the young women brought from every corner of the vast Persian Empire, one quietly stood apart, not through boastful display or loud proclamation, but through a gentle grace and inner wisdom that seemed to radiate from her very presence. Her name was Esther, a Jewish orphan whose life had been shaped by both loss and guidance. Raised with care and insight by her cousin Mordecai, her beauty was undeniable, yet it was her humility, kindness, and discernment that drew the attention of Haggai, the king's eunuch in charge of the harem. He observed her with quiet admiration, providing the finest cosmetics, the most nourishing foods, and assigning 7 loyal maids to attend her every need, ensuring she had every advantage within the palace walls. The most crucial secret Esther carried, however, was her Jewish heritage, a detail she carefully kept hidden as Mordecai had instructed. It was not a secret of shame, but of survival and strategy, a hidden thread that would one day determine the fate of her people. Every other young woman in the palace underwent a rigorous year of preparation, elaborate beauty treatments, lessons in etiquette, and training to present themselves perfectly before the king. When Esther's turn came, she requested nothing beyond what Haggai advised, demonstrating a rare combination of humility and wisdom. In her silence lay strength, in her restraint lay foresight. She understood that influence and favor in the palace were not won by bold declarations, but by discernment and the patient art of timing. When King Xerxes finally beheld Esther, he was captivated not only by her outward beauty, but by the quiet confidence and poise that seemed to command attention without effort. Unaware of her true identity, he chose her as his queen. To honor her, he hosted a lavish banquet, a celebration that stretched across the empire, and even proclaimed a holiday marking the joy of her rise. Yet, amid this splendor, Mordecai, who faithfully sat at the king's gate, remained vigilant. One day, he overheard a plot to assassinate the king, a conspiracy that could have brought ruin to the entire empire in a single night. Mordecai acted without hesitation, entrusting Esther with the critical task of revealing the plot. With courage and discretion, she informed the king, ensuring that Mordecai's name was recorded and his loyalty acknowledged. The conspiracy was investigated and confirmed. The conspirators were executed, and Mordecai's deed was inscribed in the royal chronicles, a testament to quiet heroism and unwavering faithfulness. In these intertwining threads of beauty, wisdom, secrecy, and courage, the stage was set not only for Esther's ascent to the throne, but for the invisible hand of providence that would guide her through challenges yet to come. Her story was a reminder that patience, discernment, and hidden strength often precede the greatest acts of deliverance. As queen, Esther did not allow the grandeur of the palace or the weight of the crown to dull her judgment or her heart. She continued to heed the wise counsel of her cousin Mordecai, showing not only respect, but a deep, abiding love for the man who had raised her and guided her through the perilous currents of court life. Every decision she made was tempered by his guidance, every smile and gesture measured with thought and care. Yet the palace corridors, glittering with gold and marble, concealed more than just beauty. They concealed ambition, envy, and brewing danger. Among the king's many officials, there was one who stood taller in pride than in loyalty, a man named Haman, elevated by King Xerxes himself to the highest office in the empire. Haman wielded immense power and influence, his name whispered with awe and fear throughout the palace. But beneath the outward appearance of a loyal servant of the crown lay a heart inflamed with arrogance, ambition that knew no bounds, and a hunger for unquestioned reverence. He demanded that every subject, every courtier, every servant bow before him, seeing any hesitation as an affront not only to his status, but to his very sense of self. Yet one man, steadfast and unyielding, refused. Mordecai, a Jew who served faithfully at the king's gate, would not bow. His refusal was not born of stubbornness, nor of pride in worldly honor. It was rooted in his loyalty to God, a higher authority that no earthly throne could supersede. How can I bow to a man when my heart belongs to the Lord? His silence seemed to speak. Haman's pride, confronted by Mordecai's unwavering faith, ignited a fury so deep and consuming that it would not be sated by punishing a single man. No, Haman's wrath extended far beyond Mordecai. It rippled outward like a storm across the empire, targeting every Jewish man, woman, and child, as if their very existence offended him. In the glittering courts of Susa, where power flowed like wine and royal decrees could alter the course of history, Haman, now consumed by hatred, approached King Xerxes with a plan cloaked in deception. His words were crafted like poisoned honey, sweet in delivery, deadly in intention. "There is a certain people," he said, his tone calm, calculated, almost casual, "scattered and set apart across your vast empire. Their laws are unlike ours. They do not follow your commands. They live differently. They resist the order of the kingdom. Is it wise, O king, to allow such people to remain. His voice carried the cold conviction of a man who had already determined their fate. Xerxes. Unaware of the true identity of the people Haman sought to destroy, and certainly unaware that his own queen belonged to them, listened with furrowed brow. No names were spoken, no charges proven, just the suggestion that these people so different, so dispersed, posed a threat. With a nod and the passing of a signet ring, the fate of an entire people was sealed. The king, swayed by words rather than truth, gave Haman permission to act, and so the death sentence was written. Scrolls were prepared. Letters sealed with royal authority were sent to every province, every village, every city within the empire. The decree was clear: on a single appointed day, chosen by the casting of lots, Purim, every Jewish man, woman, and child was to be destroyed, wiped out as if they had never existed. Not one was to be spared. As the news spread like wildfire, the reaction was immediate. Fear fell like a shroud over the Jewish communities. Mourning erupted from every corner of the kingdom. Mordecai, the ever-watchful guardian of Esther, tore his garments in anguish, stepping into the streets with ashes on his head, weeping aloud in public grief. Across the empire, the Jewish people fasted. They wailed. They cried out not to kings, but to the Almighty, the one who had delivered them before, who had parted seas and shaken empires. Would he deliver them now? But even as Haman's plot appeared to take root, something deeper, quieter, more divine, was unfolding, hidden behind palace walls, beneath layers of identity and royal protocol. A woman, Esther, stood at a crossroads between silence and sacrifice. Could it be that she had not just stumbled into queenship, but had been placed there by the hand of God for this very hour, a time when obedience would cost everything, a time when revealing her truth could risk her life, a time when a single voice, armed with faith, could alter the course of a kingdom? Haman believed his plan was flawless. But what happens when pride blinds a man to the divine? What happens when the quiet obedience of a woman becomes the weapon that brings down an empire's darkness? News of Mordecai's anguish soon reached the palace. Esther, now clothed in royal splendor and crowned as Queen of Persia, was deeply troubled when she learned that her cousin, the man who had once been her guardian, stood in the streets clothed in sackcloth and ashes, crying out with a broken heart, wishing to comfort him. She sent fresh garments to replace his torn and stained clothes, hoping this small gesture might ease his sorrow. But Mordecai refused. His grief was not for himself alone, but for his people, and no robe of silk could cover the wounds of an empire's decree. Through messengers, Mordecai sent Esther words that pierced deeper than any blade. He urged her to approach the king, to risk everything and plead for the lives of her people. His warning was stark, heavy with truth. Do not think that because you dwell safely in the king's house, you alone will escape. If you remain silent now, relief and deliverance for the Jews will come from elsewhere. But you and your father's house will perish. And who knows, perhaps you have come to your royal position for such a time as this. Those words carried a weight of divine purpose. Echoing like prophecy, was her crown merely ornament? Or was it her calling? Esther's heart trembled. She knew well the law of Persia. No one, not even the queen, could approach the king unsummoned. The punishment was death. unless Xerxes extended his golden scepter in mercy. To walk into the throne room uninvited was to gamble her very life. Fear pressed in, whispering of the risks. Yet Mordecai's words rung louder, urging her to see beyond fear into the hand of providence. Could it be that every step of her life, the orphaned years, the hidden heritage, the crown upon her head was leading to this single, perilous decision? At last, Esther's resolve hardened into courage. She sent her reply back to Mordecai, her voice steady with conviction, though her fate remained uncertain. Go, gather all the Jews in Susa. Fast for me. Do not eat or drink for 3 days, night or day. I and my attendants will fast as you do. When this is done, I will go to the king even though it is against the law. And if I perish, I perish. Well, with those words, the quiet orphan became a warrior, clothed not in armor, but in faith. The fast began. The prayers of a people rose like incense to heaven, and the fate of nations hung in the balance. Would the king's heart bend toward mercy, or would Esther's courage cost her life? The silence before her step into the throne room felt like the pause before a storm, the stillness before destiny unfolds. On the 3rd day of fasting, with the prayers of her people echoing in the unseen realms, Esther clothed herself not only in her royal robes, but also in the mantle of courage. Every thread of her garment seemed heavy with destiny as she walked toward the inner court of the palace. Beyond the carved pillars and gilded walls lay the king's hall, a place of both splendor and peril. There, upon the throne that faced the great entrance, King Xerxes sat in regal majesty, a figure who held in his hand both life and death. The law was clear. One misstep could end her story in silence. As Esther stood at the threshold, breath suspended, time itself seemed to pause. Would the king's eyes burn with wrath or soften with favor? When Xerxes looked up and saw her, his expression shifted, and to Esther's relief, the golden scepter was raised in his hand. That single gesture broke the weight of dread. It was mercy extended, life granted. Esther moved forward with reverence and touched the tip of the scepter, sealing her survival in that moment. The king's voice, deep and resonant, filled the hall. What is it? Queen Esther, what is your request? Even up to half the kingdom it shall be given to you. His words offered unimaginable generosity. Yet Esther did not rush. Instead, with wisdom as deliberate as her steps, she spoke. If it pleases the king, let the king and Haman come today to the banquet I have prepared. End a strong gust and P4. The request was simple, yet layered with mystery. Why a banquet? Why include Haman? The king, intrigued, ordered at once, bring Haman quickly, so that we may do what Esther asks. And so, that very day, Xerxes and Haman entered the private chamber where Esther had laid out a feast. The table gleamed with delicacies, goblets brimming with wine, yet beneath the surface of laughter and courtesy, the air was charged with unseen tension. As the wine flowed, Xerxes pressed his queen again, curiosity sharpening his voice. Now, tell me, Esther, what is your petition? It shall be granted. What is your request? Even up to half the kingdom, it will be yours. His persistence betrayed both eagerness and bewilderment. But Esther, cloaking her true purpose in patience, replied with grace, "This is my petition and my request. If the king regards me with favor, and if it pleases the king to grant it. Let the king and Haman come tomorrow to the banquet I will prepare. Then I will answer the king's question. And it for the creaming, and it for the creaming, and it for the crive to mated, and another's prive to the dine. What was she waiting for? Why delay when the threat against her people loomed so large? Was it hesitation? Or was it divine timing, God's unseen hand, directing the drama toward its perfect climax? The stage was set for a revelation, but not yet unveiled. The silence of that unanswered request hung in the air like the final note of a song not yet resolved, leaving both king and enemy unsuspecting of the storm that was soon to break. That evening, Haman left the palace in high spirits, his heart swollen with pride after sharing wine at the queen's table beside King Xerxes. To be chosen for such intimacy was, in his eyes, proof that no one in the empire rivaled his greatness. Yet, as he strode past the king's gate, his satisfaction soured. There sat Mordecai, the Jew, unmoving, unbowed, unafraid. Mordecai neither rose to honor him nor lowered his gaze in submission. In that simple act of defiance, Haman's joy shattered, replaced with a fury so fierce it burned like fire in his veins. Rage surged, but Haman curbed it for now. He swallowed his wrath, masking it with a false calm until he reached his home. There, surrounded by friends and his wife, Zeresh, he let his pride flow unchecked. He boasted of his wealth, recounting treasures amassed through years of power. He named his many sons, parading them as trophies of his strength and legacy. He gloried in the honors the king had bestowed upon him, and the exalted position he now held above every noble and official in Persia. Each word dripped with arrogance, his ego towering higher than the palace walls. Then, with a flourish of triumph, Haman revealed what he considered the crown jewel of his rising fortune, and that is not all. I alone was invited by Queen Esther to dine with the king at her banquet, and tomorrow, once again, I am summoned with him. Who else in all this empire can claim such favor? His friends nodded. Zeresh smiled. Yet beneath his words there throbbed a restless bitterness. Suddenly his tone shifted, darker, sharper. But all this gives me no satisfaction as long as I see that Jew, Mordecai, sitting day after day at the king's gate. Worried there, the room chilled under his venom. At last, Zeresh and his companions spoke, feeding the fire of his hatred with their counsel. Then build a pole, 50 cubits high. In the morning, ask the king to have Mordecai impaled upon it. Afterward, go with joy to the banquet and feast with the king. Their suggestion was cruel, but it delighted Haman. The thought of seeing his enemy humiliated and destroyed thrilled his heart. Without hesitation, he ordered the pole to be raised, a towering monument of his wrath, stretching so high it would pierce the sky. That night, while the city of Susa lay wrapped in slumber, King Xerxes tossed restlessly upon his bed. The silken sheets could not bring comfort, nor could the hush of the palace lull him into peace. Sleep fled from him as if guided by an unseen hand. In his restlessness, the king gave a command: bring me the book of the Chronicles, the record of my reign. Read to me of past days. The servants obeyed, and the great scrolls of memory were unrolled before him, filled with accounts of loyalty, betrayal, and the deeds of those who had served him. As the words were read aloud, one entry struck the king like a sudden spark in the dark. It told of Mordecai, the Jew who had exposed a deadly plot to officers of the guard. Bigthana and Teresh, who had conspired to assassinate Xerxes himself. Their scheme, uncovered by Mordecai, had been investigated and found true. Their execution swift. The king sat up sharply, the weight of the record pressing upon his mind. "What honor and recognition has Mordecai received for this act of loyalty?" he demanded. The attendants shifted uncomfortably. Their answer was as hollow as it was shocking. "Nothing has been done for him." The king's brow furrowed. To let such faithfulness go unrewarded was not only an oversight but an injustice. He would not allow it to stand. "Who is in the court?" he asked, urgency rising in his voice. Perhaps, at this very hour, someone might advise him on the matter. At that same moment, as if guided by irony itself, Haman had entered the outer courts of the palace. His purpose? To secure the king's permission to have Mordecai impaled upon the towering pole he had prepared. The attendants answered, "Haman is standing in the court." The king's command was immediate. "Bring him in." As Mans of the Pridit, Rincain, Wes in reserve. The stage was set for a meeting thick with divine irony. Haman, burning with hatred and plotting Mordecai's death, was about to hear words from the king's lips that would twist his pride into humiliation. The hand of providence moved silently through the night, turning what seemed certain into the unexpected, shaping the fall of the proud and the rise of the faithful. When Haman entered the royal court, still burning with the secret desire to see Mordecai impaled, the king greeted him with a question that seemed simple but carried the weight of destiny. "Tell me, Haman, what should be done for the man the king delights to honor?" At that moment, Haman's heart swelled with self-assurance. Who else could the king possibly mean? Surely, it must be him. His mind raced with visions of glory. He was struck to the trenches, the second in command, elevated beyond every noble, seated nearly equal to the throne. Inwardly, he thought, "Who could the king wish to honor more than me?" Eagerly he replied, layering his answer with grandeur, "For the man the king delights to honor, let a royal robe be brought, one that the king himself has worn. Let a horse be chosen, one the king has ridden, its head crowned with the royal crest. Then entrust both robe and horse to one of the king's most noble princes. Let them clothe this man in the royal garment and lead him on horseback through the city streets, proclaiming before him, 'This is what is done for the man the king delights to honor.'" His words dripped with self-admiration, every detail chosen to reflect the glory he imagined for himself. But the king's response struck him like thunder. "Excellent. Go at once. Take the robe and the horse, just as you have described, and do so for Mordecai the Jew who sits at the king's gate. Do not neglect a single detail you have recommended." Late in the crustrum, the world seemed to collapse around Haman. The very honors he had fashioned for himself were now to be heaped upon the man he despised most. Still, he could not defy the king's command. With trembling hands and a heart twisted with rage, he clothed Mordecai in the royal robe. He placed him upon the horse and, choking on humiliation, walked the streets of Susa, proclaiming the words he once thought would be shouted for him. "This is what is done for the man the king delights to honor." What bitter irony it must have been. The proud Haman reduced to a herald for the man he sought to destroy. What whispers must have spread through the city as the spectacle unfolded, a Jew honored by the king, while the most powerful official proclaimed his greatness aloud. Pride had built a gallows, but humility now wore the robe. The reversal had begun, and the hand of providence was writing a story that no man's arrogance could erase. When the public spectacle was finished, Mordecai, calm and unshaken, returned to his place at the king's gate as if nothing had changed. The robe, the horse, the proclamation, none of it swayed his steady spirit. His honor came not from garments or titles, but from the unseen God who had watched over him since the beginning. But for Haman, the moment was unbearable. Humiliation clung to him like chains. With his head covered in shame, he rushed back to his home, his pride shattered, his spirit bleeding from the bitter reversal. There, in the privacy of his chamber, Haman poured out the tale to Zeresh, his wife, and to his friends who had once fed his pride. He recounted every detail, the king's command, the robe, the horse. The proclamation shouted through the streets, not for him, but for Mordecai the Jew. His voice, once filled with boasting, now trembled with humiliation. His advisors listened in uneasy silence. Then, like a sentence falling from heaven, Zeresh and the others spoke. If Mordecai, before whom your downfall has already begun, is of Jewish origin, you cannot stand against him. You will surely come to ruin. Their words, heavy with dread, pierced the air. It was no longer the sound of encouragement, but of prophecy. The tide had turned, and they knew it. Pride had met its wall, and destiny was closing in. Yet before Haman could fully process their warning, a sudden knock shook the chamber. The king's eunuchs had arrived, their presence urgent, their timing precise. They did not give him time to recover his composure. They hurried him away toward the palace, toward the banquet Esther had prepared. There was no chance to resist, no moment to delay. He was being carried by forces he could no longer control. And so, once again, Haman sat at the royal table, this time with dread gnawing beneath his smile. On the second day of feasting, as goblets of wine shimmered under the golden light, King Xerxes turned to Esther with the same question he had asked before, but this time with pressing insistence. What is your petition? Queen Esther, it will be given to you. What is your request? Even up to half the kingdom it shall be granted. But the room seemed to hold its breath. Two men sat before her, one her husband, ruler of Persia, the other, her enemy, architect of her people's doom. The moment she had delayed, prayed, and fasted for had finally come. Would Esther remain silent, or would she risk everything and unveil the truth? At last, the moment arrived. Esther, her heart steady after days of fasting and prayer, lifted her voice before the king. Every word carried the weight of life and death. If I have found favor with you, your majesty, and if it pleases you, grant me my life. This is my petition, and spare my people. This is my request. For I and my people have been sold to be destroyed, to be killed, and to be annihilated. If it were only a matter of slavery, I would have remained silent, for such suffering alone would not have justified troubling the king. But this decree is the death of a people. It was apparent to the ESTHER'S. The hall trembled with the force of her confession. In that instant, the secret Esther had hidden for so long was revealed. She was a Jew, one of the condemned. The king, startled and enraged, turned to her with a demand. Who is he? Where is the man who has dared to do such a thing? Esther's eyes lifted, unwavering, and her finger pointed across the table. An adversary and an enemy, this vile Haman. The words fell like a hammer striking stone. In a heartbeat, the power in the room shifted. Haman, once so proud and untouchable, now stood exposed, trembling, his schemes unraveled by the queen's voice. Terror seized him, for he knew his mask had been torn away before both king and queen. King Xerxes rose in fury. His face darkened with wrath, and left his wine untouched as he stormed into the palace garden. His footsteps echoed like thunder, and silence filled the hall. Haman remained, knowing that his fate was already sealed. Desperation replaced pride. He turned not to the king but to the queen he had plotted against, throwing himself down to beg for his life. His voice, once arrogant, now cracked with fear as he pleaded for mercy. At that very moment, the king re-entered the hall. His eyes fell upon the scene, Haman collapsing onto the couch where Esther reclined. Rage ignited in his voice as he roared, "Will he even assault the queen while she is with me in my own house?" The words were scarcely out of his mouth when the attendants moved swiftly, covering Haman's face. In an instant, his downfall was no longer rumor but reality. The man who had built gallows for another was now bound by his own doom. As the silence in the banquet hall lingered, one of the king's eunuchs, Harbona, stepped forward with words that sealed Haman's fate. "Your Majesty," he said. A pole reaching 50 cubits high stands at Haman's house. He had it set up for Mordecai, the very man who once exposed a plot and saved the king's life. The irony of providence struck like lightning. The very instrument of death built for the innocent now waited for the guilty. Without hesitation, King Xerxes gave the command, "Impale him on it." At once, Haman was seized and taken away. The towering pole, once a monument to his pride and vengeance, became the stage of his downfall. And there, in front of the city, he was impaled upon the very structure he had prepared for Mordecai. The cruel plotter who had sought to destroy a people was destroyed by his own hand, and the king's fury at last subsided. That same day, the tide of history turned. King Xerxes placed into Esther's hands the estate of Haman, the enemy of the Jews, granting her full possession of the wealth and influence he had once wielded. Mordecai, whose loyalty had been overlooked for so long, was summoned into the king's presence. There, before the court, Esther revealed his true identity as her cousin and protector. The king, recognizing his faithfulness, removed the royal signet ring he had taken back from Haman and placed it upon Mordecai's hand. Esther, in a gesture both personal and profound, appointed him over Haman's estate. The orphan girl and her guardian now stood as queen and counselor, honored above all. Yet the story did not end with vengeance. A greater deliverance was written that day. At Esther's request, the king issued a new decree. The Jews across the empire were granted the right to stand and defend themselves against any who sought their destruction. The very day that had been marked for their annihilation became the day of their survival. In Susa, in every province, the Jews were delivered. Their cries of despair turned into songs of victory. The hidden queen had become the savior of her people, and what seemed certain doom had transformed into triumph. The gallows of the wicked became the testimony of divine justice, and the courage of one woman, placed for such a time as this, became the turning point of a nation's destiny. In the end, the decree of death was overturned, and the Jewish people were saved from destruction. What had once been a day marked for annihilation was transformed into a day of victory. Mordecai, once a quiet guardian at the king's gate, was lifted into a place of honor, becoming a trusted advisor to King Xerxes, clothed in authority and carrying the very ring that had sealed decrees of both doom and deliverance. The people who had mourned in ashes and sackcloth now celebrated with feasting, laughter, and joy, their cries of despair exchanged for songs of triumph. From that moment forward, Mordecai decreed that the festival of Purim would be established for all generations, a sacred remembrance of the day when sorrow was turned to gladness and mourning into celebration. But Esther's story reaches beyond the courts of Persia and into the heart of every generation. It is not only a tale of political intrigue or royal banquets, it is a testimony of courage, faith, and divine providence. When darkness pressed in, when silence seemed safer than truth, one woman dared to risk her crown, her position, and even her life for the sake of her people. Her words, "If I perish, echo through history as a declaration of fearless trust in the God who orchestrates events unseen. The story of Esther reminds us that no night is so dark that heaven's hand is absent. No decree so final that it cannot be reversed by divine power. God's providence is not always loud, yet it moves quietly, weaving together events in ways we cannot always understand, until suddenly the hidden becomes clear. Just as he raised Esther to her moment of destiny, so too he calls us to trust him in our own moments of testing. Her legacy continues to whisper to all who will listen that faith can stand against fear, that courage can overturn injustice, and that God is always at work for the good of his people. Esther's life is an eternal reminder that we, too, may be called for such a time as this. What? The story of Esther does not fade into the dust of ancient scrolls. It still speaks with clarity and fire to us today. Her courage reminds us that true greatness is not measured by crowns or thrones, but by the willingness to stand for what is right, even when fear whispers that silence is safer. Esther teaches us that faith is not passive, it is active, daring, and willing to step into danger for the sake of others. In our world, we may not face a royal court or a decree of death, but we do face moments where silence feels easier than truth, where compromise seems safer than conviction. And it is in those moments that Esther's voice echoes across time. For such a time as this, I believe each of us is placed in this generation, in our families, workplaces, and communities, with a divine purpose. Your life, like Esther's, is not accidental. It is intentional, crafted by God for a reason. Her story inspires me personally to remember that even when God feels hidden, he is still moving pieces behind the scenes. What looks like coincidence is often providence in disguise. And if he could use an orphan girl in Persia to save a nation, he can certainly use you right where you are to make a difference, to bring hope, and to be a light. So, if this message has stirred something in your spirit, don't let it end here. Share this story so others can be encouraged. Like this video if Esther's courage inspired you. Subscribe and hit the notification bell so you won't miss the next message of hope and faith. And leave a comment below. Tell me, how has Esther's story spoken into your own life? To everyone watching, whether you support through super thanks or simply by your presence here, I want to say thank you from the bottom of my heart. Your journey matters. Your faith matters. And may you always remember, you, too, are here for such a time as this.